Hi diddly do, it's the Solos Season 2. What's the fucking story, everyone? I haven't done a solo in about 2 years. Originally, I used Lent as an excuse to pull my finger out and do what I'd been meaning to do for ages, which at the time was record and upload a solo episode. So this is about 2 years ago. I had done half a dozen different conversations on the Off the Lead podcast, but I'd wanted to, but had never done a solo episode. So I committed to doing a solo a day for 40 days during the Lent period. Didn't quite work out that way, but look, I got the 40 odd done in 6 months, so better than nothing. Done beats perfect and all that jazz. This time round, I have another opportunity. It's not Lent, but Ireland, as you may or may not know, is in 6 weeks of national lockdown. So that's essentially the whole country being locked down with the exception of essential services. A tricky enough term, essential services, but anyway, I might do a solo on that. So the original idea for this time round was because there's 42 days, so 6 weeks of 7 days, 6 sevens, 42. The idea was to do an intro podcast, which will be this one, and then an outro podcast, which will be the last one I do, and in between do 40. So basically do one a day for 40 days with an intro and an outro, and that will be the 6 weeks of lockdown. That was the original plan. I'm going to stick to that somewhat. I'm essentially going to talk about whatever I want to talk about on each episode. But if I'm stuck for something to talk about on any given day, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to one of my previous podcasts, one of my previous solo podcasts, and redo it. So the idea being that I redo each one with everything that I've known or learned, should I say, in the subsequent 2 years. I've fucking developed a lot, I've grown a lot, I've changed a lot. My views haven't changed a whole pile. I've become more interested in things that I wasn't as interested in before, psychedelics being a huge one. Ancient civilizations is a rabbit hole that I am buried into my toes in at the minute. More on that to come. I'll probably do an episode, if not a couple of episodes, on our ancient civilizations that we know of. Think the Egyptians, think the Indus River Valley situation, Indus River civilization. There we go. The Yellow River civilization, Porto Chico, if that's what it's even called. And look, as I said, I'm down that rabbit hole at the minute. I'm learning loads, and I hope to put together something that will have a start, middle, and end. So that's another thing I'm going to hopefully do with a lot, or at least some of these episodes, is not just hit record and get what's on my mind off it. I'm actually going to put a bit of work into some of them. I've notes in front of me at the minute, for example, just to make sure I don't forget one or two small points. The other thing is past guest and friend of the show, Ivan McQuillan, included me in a WhatsApp group yesterday or the day before. So he set up this WhatsApp group, the idea being that he would include everyone he thought would be interested in doing the Wim Hof challenge, which I believe is Wim Hof's breathing exercises every day for the next 40 days. That I started today. By all means, jump on that bandwagon with me. There was also something else about possibly having a cold shower at the end of your showers. I know Wim Hof does a lot of cold shock therapy stuff. More on that to come. But I'm going to be doing that again, started it today. Going to be doing that for the next 40 odd days. What else am I going to cover? I'm going to definitely cover Patreon. I set up a Patreon account at the kind of height of Off the Lead's popularity. It was great. It was fantastic. It was a way of funding the podcast and lighting a fire under the whole thing. It ultimately ended up in me, how could I put this? I felt like I ended up having to put out content for my patrons, because there was people paying me to do what I was doing. So I felt my patrons essentially ended up being my boss, or at least I started to view them as my boss, which cranked up the anxiety, cranked up the, I haven't released anything in a couple of days. I better put something up. I won't do it now. And that, that was a week, that was 2 weeks, that was 6 months, that was 2 years. And across that period of time, I fucking... look, it didn't work. And again, I'll get my thoughts clear and concise and congruent and in order and I'll try and explain as best I can to both myself and anyone listening how and why that went wrong. Another couple of things that I've learned over the past number of years is I found out what imposter syndrome was, which I think is a fucking crippling cunt of a thing that affects me and a whole heap of other people out there. I've often heard in relation to anxiety that people who suffered with anxiety got great help when they found out what they were suffering from was called anxiety, and that, you know, loads of people around the world suffer with it all the time. Just even getting a name on what's wrong with you can be half the battle. You can imagine if you've got a really bad pain in the back of your right eye and you're worried about it and it's sore and you're embarrassed to talk about it and you're afraid of it and it's basically ruining your life, and then you go to the doctor one day and he goes, oh yeah, that's just blah 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 blah, and you go, oh okay, I've been worrying all this time about blah 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 blah, didn't realise it was a thing. Oh yeah, 1 in 10 people suffer from it, take this, this and this and you'll be grand in a week. Fucking hell. Even aside from having the cure, you know, that silver bullet approach, even outside of that, just knowing that what you're suffering from is okay. And that's finding out what imposter syndrome was helped me massively. So I'm definitely going to do a solo on just that. But yeah, look, this is going to be the first one out of the way, thankfully. I look forward to recording more. If you have anything that you want to talk to me about, or that you would like to hear me talk about, should I say, or if you have any guests, that's another thing I don't have written down. I am about halfway through building my COVID-friendly mobile podcast studio. So I'm hoping to, during COVID, drive around to whoever will meet me and bring a mobile studio with me. COVID-friendly, completely safe. The way this thing has been designed is that I could have a 15-hour conversation with somebody who had COVID and not be in any fear of catching it off them, and vice versa. If I was to have it, my guest is going to be completely safe. We'll essentially be in 2 separate rooms divided by perspex, with each mic connected to our headphones, so we're not muffled as we speak to each other through the perspex screen. Look, I'll load photos and it should clarify what I have in my head. So yeah, aside from that, this one was going to be a bit all over the place because it's a couple of years since I've done one and I'm all jittery and it's scary and new and different. But I'm trying to get back into the good habits of old and getting out of my way and just fucking getting on with it and doing it. So look, I shall chat to you tomorrow. But before I let you go, I'd just like to remind everybody that this episode and all the episodes on YouTube have been brought to you by past guest and friend of the show, Pat McKeown. Pat is very similar to myself insofar as that he's long had an interest in the mind and more specifically the brain and how they both interact, to such an extent that he went and spent 4 years getting a degree in neuroscience and then spent a further year in getting a master's in psychology. Now what he's done is pretty fucking cool. He's after setting up his own YouTube channel. It's called Pat Psychology Masters and there's a link in the description. Now what he's done here is he's uploaded all the best bits that he's learned over the last 5 years and put them into short, plain English, easy to understand YouTube videos for the likes of myself. His YouTube channel has been a massive resource for me in understanding both my mind and the mind of others. So hit up Pat Psychology Masters YouTube channel, subscribe, give it a like and a comment and a share. All that kind of stuff helps, and I'll chat to you soon.